A major power shift in Japan following Sanae Takaichi's landslide snap election win. And here at home, a new U.S. foreign policy idea is drawing attention as President Trump's Board of Peace and China's response spark global debate. We spoke with retired Marine Colonel Grant Newsham, a senior fellow at the Center for Security Policy and author of When China Attacks, for more. Grant Newsham, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you back on the show.
I'm always glad to be here.
Now that Takaichi's coalition has swept the snap elections, winning a supermajority, you've actually seen 19 different prime ministers in Japan. What can we expect in Japan under Takaichi now that she has that supermajority?
You had immensely popular. She got a huge amount of the vote, and conservative candidates got like 85% of the votes, or the seats, but the actual votes, it was a huge majority compared to what you usually get. And she is somebody who comes in with an actual platform. She has ideas of what she intends to do. She's actually started doing it, in the short time she's been in office. And usually when you have Japanese prime ministers, they come in with a slogan. And if you ask them, well, what are you going to do? They would really generally be at a loss. They would say, well, I'll ask my chief of staff, or I'll ask the government what I'm supposed to do. And with her, I saw this quote in an article about the election, and it was a young Japanese lady who was interviewed, and she says, well, Takaichi says things clearly, and it's about that simple. So she's got a plan, she's going to try and implement it, and this is something that the Japanese people often respond to very well when they see leadership.
We've seen China responding rather negatively to the election, trying to make sure the status quo and peace remains. Speaking of peace, though, there's a lot of focus on President Trump's new Board of Peace. China was invited but has rejected to join, saying, it wants to stay and it remains fully committed to the United Nations. What do you make of the Board of Peace and what message that is sending to China?
Well, at some point, one has to actually respond to things President Trump suggests or starts doing and say, well, it's never been tried before. Let's see how it works. I think it is a reaction to sort of the inability of the United Nations to really accomplish much. The United Nations has been working on Gaza for decades, and how well has it done? And that, I think, was the original purpose of the Board of Peace, was to come up with a way to really develop Gaza and deal with this problem that has only gotten worse over the years, hasn't gotten better. And you bring in people with money, people with some ideas, business people, and see if you can actually create some economic prosperity as a way to defuse these rather deep-seated animosities. Now, how it's actually going to work in practice, hard to say, but since Marco Rubio's involved, I suspect it has a fighting chance. But it is something that has just gotten, I'd say, people who are used to everything that's been done for the last 70, 80 years as the only way to do it, it's really got their hair on fire. So President Trump has come up with something different, and we'll see what he can do.
Speaking of the UN, there's been a lot of reporting over the years, especially with the countries where China has a big presence, whether that's Belt and Road or other initiatives and influence campaigns, that a lot of those countries, a lot in Africa, vote along with China, especially when it comes to human rights issues where they don't expose it. Could the Board of Peace be something that actually creates change, unlike what we've seen with the UN?
Well, you never know. The UN has simply gotten so ridiculous. When you have, countries like Iran, for example, China on the Human Rights Commission, and you do have to ask yourself, well, what has it produced? What is this class of people? What have these organizations produced? And it's not a very good scorecard. And you never know. Board of Peace, it's got its work cut out for it to try and displace something that is so established as the United Nations and other international organizations. And if it has some immediate success, well, maybe it just might, over time, become a replacement, an alternative to the really one I used to collect for UNICEF as a child on Halloween. At some point you have to say, well, these organizations don't really do what they're supposed to do. So it's a long shot, and it's one of many things, many initiatives that the Trump administration has going. But one never knows. But As I said, you've seen so many things come out of this White House, that everyone thinks are impossible, and then something happens. So I'm in the wait and see mode, but not willing to dismiss it.
Well, Grant Newsham, as always, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me. I always enjoy the opportunity.